to kind of see if it works as almost a two-pronged thing where first and foremost,
listening,
you
watching,
want to
downloading,
see
however
from
you
a
consume
fan
podcasts.
standpoint
As
how
always, I'm your
engaged they
host,
are
Will
with
Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter,
that product.
NTH287, also on
For
LinkedIn, where I post more
instance, if
content.
again
The
using basketball
website
as a
where you can find
reference,
everything
if
is
you go to a basketball
dsmsports.net, and you can
game and
find
you
the podcast
notice, fan
whichever
cams,
podcast
right? There's
platform is your favorite.
30,000 fan cams. It
We
seems
have
like
a
now.
best of episode for you guys today. I try
That
to
is
do these
an
once every
idea
quarter,
that
but
probably will
somehow
never die because it
got lost
works
this year,
every
and we
single
haven't
time.
done
Because
one in a
who doesn't
long
want to
time.
see
So it's
themselves
a
on
great
a
opportunity to catch up with the
TV?
backlog.
That is,
You're going to hear
that's just
about
getting to the
15
psychological
minutes
nature of a human being.
5
Same
different
with
episodes. It's a
T-shirt
great
talks,
way
right?
to
That's going to
get
be in
a
every
snack, a
building,
little
every
bit of bite
stadium till the
of
rest of
each
time. Because
episode.
who
There's just so
doesn't
much
want
good
free
stuff. We've been
stuff?
doing
Like
this
there's
podcast
certain
for
things
almost
that's going
12
to just
years. We have something
stand the test
special
of time.
coming up for the 12-year
Half court
anniversary.
shots, for instance,
Stay
for
tuned for that.
$30,000.
But first, we're going to dive into the best
The
of
other
this
part
episode.
is
Just 5
if you tie
tremendous
it to a
interviews.
brand, especially
Really
see if it
enjoyed
works, you
listening
tie it
back
to a
to these
brand.
and these
Does that brand make
principles and
sense?
lessons
Because
and
there's some
insights are
games to
so
where you
timeless,
do
still
it
so
and it
insightful.
doesn't
So
work the
a little
way
preview of what's to
you
come.
want it to
I'll tell
because the
you all
brand was
5 you're going to hear
so
from, and then we'll get right into it.
tied to something.
The
I
first
did
interview
a
is going to be with
game
Devin Dismay.
in Santa Cruz
He
from
really
G team
made
out
his
there,
bones
and
coming
it
up with the
was
Golden State
tied to a
Warriors.
pizzeria,
Does a
and they
tremendous
wanted to
job
do
with
human
athlete
bowling.
marketing.
But
Today
there
is
was
the head of
nothing
content
else
for X
tied
Games.
to
Also
it.
does athlete
Naturally, there
marketing
wasn't
content
like
on the
the
side as
bowling
well.
pins were
Really
breadsticks,
smart
or
dude.
like
And
there
then
wasn't
after
anything that
Devin, you're going
really
to hear
tied
from
in
Vic
the
Chokshi.
brand
He is
to it. It was
now
just
the
like, hey,
senior
here's
managing editor
this. We're
of
just gonna throw our
athletics
name
of
on
the
it.
Athletics
And while the
sports betting
game was
vertical.
fun,
Just one of the
from a
smartest guys you'll
branding
meet when it
and
comes
almost
to content
relativity standpoint,
around
like people
gambling
didn't
and sports
know who
betting.
the sponsor was
You're
until
gonna really enjoy
you see it on the video
that
board or
interview
you
or
get
that
the
part of that interview.
$25 gift
After Vic,
certificate
you're
to
gonna
the
hear from
restaurant or
Amy
something.
Keene.
So
She is really a
I think that's
legend
a
in the
two-pronged thing
industry,
to where like
so well
fans,
connected, so well
and
loved for good
another one
reason,
is like
and really one of the
another great
sharpest
example of
minds
this
in the
is
industry
the
today.
100-point
She
challenge, right?
is
Again, using
now
basketball as a
the
reference. It's like
co-founder of Hat Trick,
you'll have
where they
99
do a ton of
points or
great
you'll
work in
be
the
and
content
someone's at the
space.
free throw line,
So
someone's like
after, so you'll hear from Amy. Then after Amy,
like they're
will be
chanting
Perry Mattern.
for what
He
the
is now
prize
with
is.
the Brooklyn Nets, or really
That
BSC
is not
Global,
only
with the Nets
just
and all of their
a
various properties
activation
under
that
the
works,
Brooklyn
but it's
Sports Entertainment
also
Global
product
brand.
placement, right?
Really
Like I'm
smart
doing
dude.
a Jack in the
When I
Box for the
talked to him, he was
tacos,
with the New
man. I
York
can't
Jets.
wait. So
So
it's
really
all
good
these
stuff there.
things
And then
that
finally, we'll end with
people
Alex
need to understand
Gervasio.
when they're putting the
He is a
games
consultant working
together
with
and putting
coaches,
just
athletes,
overall
executives,
entertainment
and
together
brands
for
with
an
a focus on
in-stadium
digital, and
experience.
really one of the
That
leaders when it
those are
comes
the
to
two things
helping
that are make it
coaches
work
embrace
because
digital
now you have
platforms in
product
particular.
recognition as well
So
as
let's
fan
get
engagement.
started. Again, as I
Yeah,
alluded
I
to,
like
your
that,
first
and I
hear
think
from
it,
Devin
it
Dismay.
dovetails
He
well
is
into
now the
just
head of content
everything
with
you're
the X
doing
Games. He was working
throughout
with
your
the X
career,
Games
but
when I spoke
even
with him
now
as
with
well.
working with athletes and getting them
Came up with the
involved
Golden
with
State
brands as
Warriors. In
well.
this part of the interview, you're going to
You
hear
think
about
about
what it was
that
like
game
creating
ops,
content
the
with the
game
Warriors,
presentation stuff
working
when
with
you are
athletes
working
in
with a
general,
team, whether it's
especially
NBA,
superstar athletes
NFL,
like
NBA,
Steph and
or MLS,
KD
whatever
or
it might
Kevin
be.
Durant. And really the
There are
marketing and branding of
there
athletes
are
is so
different
important
parties that
now with
are
where he is
kind
with
of
the X Games.
at
Really
work at
helping
play.
athletes
You
make the
have the
most of their
fans, you want
brand, their
them to be
platform.
engaged, and
That's
you
going to
want
move the
them to
needle for
have
the X
fun with
Games
it and
overall.
appreciate it, not feel
But
like they're
here he
being
is. Listen to a bit of my
thrown
interview
at
with
their
Devin
way.
Dismay.
You want the sponsors to feel like they're getting relevant value and relevant recognition, and not just like you said, a human bowling contest with no tie to the sponsor at all. And you want the team itself as well to have it feel like it's something that is positive for them. They're giving their fans a positive experience, and also that if it's going to be around a point total, that it's a positive thing, that it's good when the team accomplishes it. So as you're thinking about like how a brand and athlete best work together in terms of content, in terms of any sort of partnership, how does that come into play where you are really making sure that you understand what the brand wants to get out of something, you understand what the player wants to get out of something, you understand what you're trying to do for the fans, while also balancing that there is relevant value for the partner and it's more than just a logo slap or presented by?
Yeah. First and foremost, the number one priority thing is that the athlete's voice must be tried and true in any piece of content that comes out. So if a brand wants to throw their name to anything that an athlete is doing, or it's a original concept, that concept needs to be authentically that athlete's voice first and foremost, because that is what's going to get the engagement. That's what's going to get the sell. That's what's going to get the views or whatever the end goal is for that brand, for that concept. Because how many times have we seen brand integration with an athlete or team or whomever, and it falls flat because it is such a commercialized piece of content?
Yeah.
And and you see it when the athlete's not involved. I'll use one that's like, while we love the in-arena try and copy that concepts, where, an athlete will do something, behind a hoop shot, and they'll just say, try and copy that. And it's a random kind of piece of of integration. Fans don't really get too tried and involved, especially in arena. Now, if you go to let's say, when you get I'm trying to think of one right off the top of my mind. When they doodle almost like the what's it called, newlywed game almost. I can't remember the name to do it in arena, but that is strictly playing off the personalities of two athletes and showcasing them truly while having a brand integration with it, right? That is much more received, and we see those go viral all the time versus the other one. Now talking strictly content on the athletes' pages, the brand's mission, first and foremost, usually has to tie into what an athlete is tied to. So like if an athlete is a gamer, the brands that we're going to look forward to, or I'm going to look forward to is gaming, to where they can now have some sort of product integration. They can have some sort of tie into that organization. They can have some sort of return on that partnership that is not just monetarily, but it's also something they're truly interested in and could really build an authentic relationship, because there's too many one-time only deals where they just want brand recognition and they kind of go away. And people read through that like it's no other. We see that nowadays with influencer campaigns more than anything. So for an athlete, you got to be much more protective, because while they are influencers, we don't want to devalue their voice for a paycheck. So making sure whatever that piece of content is authentically them, because that's also what the fans are going to want. And then finding brands that really tie into that piece of content naturally.
Let's hone in on the athlete perception of authenticity and knowing who they want to be. And this goes back throughout your career and continuing to today of, hey, X player is going to be part of this fun campaign that we're doing, or this fun piece of content we're doing for in-game and or for social. How much do they think about and are cognizant of, like, by me participating in this whatever newlywed game or kids draw the players or whatever it might be, how cognizant are athletes of what that means for their brand, and if this is portraying them in the way they want to be portrayed, or hell yeah, I'm going to raise my hand and be involved with this because it's going to make me more endearing and more likable for fans, for potential partners. And how do you see that sort of evolve throughout your career as you started working more hand in hand with players, both on stuff for the team channels as well as for their own channels, and how that might have differed?
Yeah, I think within the last, talking 2022 now, I would say maybe there was a big shift. 2017, there was a huge shift in that type of knowledge for players. I think pre-2017, only a few got it. And even the ones who got it didn't know how to optimize it. They were really just trying to figure it out. Look at someone like, let's use Steph Curry, for example, right? Steph was building like his SC30 empire at the time, and also trying to do content, like smaller content pieces, but they didn't really do the best. So he ended up stopping. If you go to his YouTube page, you can see that. So they took a break to really figure it out. But then as he got more and more cognizant, you'll see some of the activations he no longer participates in. For instance, him realizing how much his voice was worth, he would only do a small amount of Warriors specific content that really featured him on camera, because he knew at the end of the day, if he does that, he's not getting a piece of whatever that pie is. So if he goes now and does the same concept on his channel, he's now able to make not only money there, he's able to tell it without me, or without the team, essentially, not without me, but without the team almost controlling the narrative. Now he controls the narrative, what story he tells. He controls that final edit. He controls how it's posted. And any brands or monetary deals that come from that, that's all him. That doesn't have to go through the team to where he sees nothing. He's just kind of like a patsy for it.
Yeah.
Now, as we evolve, right, we see this more and more, especially with the evolution of, the platform TikTok, right? I think TikTok is a huge platform that, we all needed to gauge for a year. And after seeing it for a year and what it's done, it's really turned into I'm going to say the second top platform in the world, because I still can't believe there was a day last year that it took over YouTube as the most watched platform online. It was the craziest stat I've ever seen because I don't think I've seen YouTube lose that battle in 20 years or something. Well, however long YouTube's been on. So the evolution of that, we've seen the evolution of, obviously, speaking of YouTube channels, Twitch channels, partnership deals with things like a YouTube or Facebook or Netflix or whomever, to where now these athlete stories no longer need or even participate with the teams unless they are those, let's call them tier 2 or tier 3 athletes who still need a little more publicity. And this is the way to kind of build that recognition out. But I think after 2017, and ironically, I'm gonna kind of fault that championship team of the Warriors, is like when Kevin Durant came over to Golden State after that 2016 finals, 2016, 2017, that's where you saw the evolution of like 35 Ventures, of the boardroom, Kevin Durant's YouTube channel. That's where JaVale started Parking Lot Chronicles. Like, all these things were really popping because this one team had started to optimize their content. Draymond is now doing, he's almost a media personality essentially, because now he has his show on Uninterrupted. But a lot of that started building from that 2017 year. So I think there was a huge shift that year with athletes across the board. Cam Newton's another great example of that, to where he started telling his story. And he even has his own production company now, because he understood, like, hey, I don't need the Carolina Panthers to tell my story in New York. I don't need the New England Patriots to tell my story. I'm going to tell it in the way I do it, right? He released a video after he got released from New England talking about his side. It's a full-on production. I think he got 1.1 million views or something like that. But he made money off telling that story. If he had done that after he signed to Carolina, right? Carolina would have pocketed that revenue. He really wouldn't have got nothing but the brand recognition, which he doesn't really need anymore. So the athletes learning this now, and then younger and younger, we can talk about the NIL as well, that they are learning the importance of their voice, their brand, their personality, their everything. Now at an 18, 19-year-old level, 17, think about Mikey Williams out there in San Diego. They are going to really put pressure on teams, media, etc., because they're not going to be given those same opportunities away for free. There's going to have to come with a dollar sign. And that is something I think is going to be fantastic, because we're not only going to get the tried and true version of an athlete, but we're also going to pretty much revolutionize how brands integrate their names, their brands, their voices, their products, whatever it may be, within an athlete partnership, which is clutch.
Oh man, there's so much here that I want to pick through with you, Devin. This is like you opened up a Pandora's box, and I love it. I love to hear about this evolving dynamic of the athlete team relationship. It wasn't that long ago where, I don't want to say that the athletes need the teams just as much as the teams need the athletes, and vice versa. But at some point there was, hey, if I want to get my story told, if I want to get cool content out there about me, I kind of got to, play along with the team and collaborate with them. And that's not going anywhere. There's still that possibility, that capability, but you've had this move to, hey, I am at the level where I can bring in my own content team. I can hire my own content, producers. So how did that play out early on with the Warriors? And then moving forward as well of, hey, yes, we have this, we're starting out this with Warrior Studio, this in-house production agency almost, that we're going to be telling these great stories. And in some ways, it's, as an athlete, it's like, well, awesome. This team's going to be, they're paying me millions of dollars to play basketball, and they're also going to be giving me quote unquote free content that is, telling my story and being good for me. But at the same time, now it's like, well, the more time I spend on that content, it's for their channels, but I'm not focusing on my channels quite as much, or I can producing content myself, and now I don't maybe need their production team. So what was that collaboration and communication like of early on? It might have been, hey, we love to do this project with you. And then later on, it might be, hey, can you do this project with us? Because it's almost like a trade-off where they don't have to say yes. They can say, no, I'm going to spend that time after practice doing my own thing. So what was that collaboration like, and how did that evolve as athletes became more aware that, hey, I don't need your production team to do this for me?
Yeah. I think early on, again, I'm gonna use that 2017 example. Yeah. I think that between 2014 and 2016, there was obviously the Warriors were what they were right there, right before, even before Kevin came over. And there was still like, hey, we're going to tell this story. And there was a lot of, internal, like the team, like we would do it, right? Like there was a lot of like, this is Steph's biggest game. This is Clay's biggest game. Like we're having fun. We're doing this. They're really incorporating them with us. Then obviously that's where national media take over. I think at the time, and I don't know how it's operating now post my leave, but at the time, a PR's role is to really optimize the national media. So you would see us get bumped for national media, which, okay, understandable. Like ESPN comes in, I'm not gonna say no to Richard Michaels, but like at the time I was, we were just like, all right, cool, we get it. But then it was more so like newspaper, like we'd have like the Times come in, or we'd have the Athletic come in, or we would have local stuff. They're like the Chronicle or whomever, and they would start getting stories over us to where like we would have to essentially fight for these like for time with players.
Yeah.
And then that changed immediately when Kevin came, to where we were pretty much bumped to the back and be like, hey, get in when you can. Like if you see him for 5 seconds, try doing it. But there was also a lot of hurdles, right? Like everyone wanted to talk to the Warriors at that point. Everyone wanted to be somewhat involved in what the team was. So we had to tell the story from a different angle, to where now we can't get to our big four, right? Dre, Clay, Steph, and Kevin. Well, let's talk to everyone around that. So I would then, this is really the start of what I was thinking of, like, everyone is so worried about these four. Nobody is worried about the other, the other 12, the other 13. So let me talk to the other 13. Hey, Jordan Bell, let me get you for 5 seconds. Hey, Quinn Cook, let me get you for 20 minutes to talk about your life. Nick Young, when you get here, people want to talk to you, but shoot, you got 5 minutes. Let me holler at you for a second, my boy. JaVale, when you get here, let's talk. So getting to know those guys allowed us to tell the story of the team in a different way than using the top four. And I think that was important because it showcased how all athlete voices are important, not just your top tier ones. And because of that, right, we won, I won an Emmy with Quinn Cook on his documentary because no one had really spoken about him on what it was, right? We got nominated awards for just funny stuff we did with Nick and JaVale during that year, because Nick and JaVale were just, their dynamic is great and everyone loves to see that. And then from there, it was like I made relationships with Sean Livingston, to where post Warriors, I helped him out with his retirement announcement. So it was all of these things to where everyone ignored these other ones and really tried to go after the top four, to where like we had to pivot and kind of go the other way, which allowed us to then tell the story. And I think now, with the importance of players having their voices, now everyone up to the last person on the bench is telling their stories. Let's use an example recently of one of my good friends, one of my boys, Alfonso McKinney. Used to play for the Warriors, used to play for the Lakers, now out here with the Bulls after just going through the G League once again. He's still dropping little videos here and there on his Instagram that kind of tell and showcase his story, because he just signed with his childhood team, Chicago Bulls.
Yeah. So
while, his story may not be the most appealing to national media at the moment, that's still a story that should be told, because it is still an important life achievement for him to be playing in his hometown for his hometown team, while his family is all still here, while his friends are all still here, all of these things that are super important. So it's going to be more and more tough for the team athlete relationship, because at some point they're going to be like, no, you're going to have to contractually make me do stuff for your team, because right now they do the same thing with the media, right? Hey, you got to have 12 media availabilities this year. Okay, cool. But if he misses one, guess who gets fined? So they're going to have to start baking those in, I feel, at some point. And then teams are just going to have to be creative on how they tell the stories, with highlights, with, behind the scenes stuff that other people can't get. And again, building those relationships to where some guys may not care and really enjoy being on camera, or even enlist the team to be like, hey, we would love for you to help us out with this documentary. It is still going to be my project, but I would love for it to be in collaboration with X team. But there's going to have to be a contract. There's going to be some money split. There's going to have to be this and that. I just think at that point, teams are going to have to figure out how to navigate that, because the athletes more and more are going to understand that their voice, from the first guy to the 16th guy, especially talking from a basketball standpoint, NFL, we know how crazy these stories are going on now. They're going to have to figure it out now, because the more and more that the NIL athletes learn, it's going to be even worse once they go pro, because they're not going to even have a shot to be like, hey, I'm the number one draft pick. Hey, we need to do this behind the scenes. Sorry, no, I've teamed up with Tom Brady's Shadow Lion, and they're actually my production house. So you need to work in tandem with them.
Just awesome stuff from Devin. I really enjoyed that whole interview. I highly recommend going back into the podcast archives. We'll link up in the show description as well. That's episode number 214. Devin is still doing great things, and we really appreciate him coming on the podcast way back when and listening back to some of it. But next up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast, I really enjoyed meeting Vic Choksey. Again, really deeply involved in the growth of the sports gambling vertical and sports gambling content. He started out doing his own thing, building up his personal brand and blog, which you're going to hear about that a little bit in the portion of our interview. And we also talk about what it's like to create gambling content in general and what's going to differentiate all these players kind of bidding for users. It's a very crowded space, and how do you stand out? When I spoke with Vic, he was with Fox Sports as their director of gambling content. Today, he is the senior managing editor of The Athletics sports betting vertical. So really, really smart dude. And here he is listening up to some of my interview with Vic.
So if I started now, I would definitely go digital, right? And just a whole array of not only writing, but doing podcasting, doing videos, doing interviews, putting it out on YouTube, just trying to build your brand as soon as possible, because I do think that there's still a lack of good talent in the space. And so if you want your first opportunity, how are you going to get that? Unless you really know someone or you're just one of the best ever, which is rare, people need to notice you somehow, right? And what's the best way to do that? Just put your stuff out there and organically, and just, keep at it, get your reps in, and you'll be surprised. So there's a lot of big decision makers on social that find people that route, right? So that's probably the way that I would go now, but it's so different now, right? Compared to back then. There weren't even that many people doing podcasts when I started the blog.
Right. No, it's almost like, okay, like, so you want to be a writer, you want to work in the space. Okay, so you can write, but what else can you do? Like, like writing used to be more than enough to make it in the space, and now it's like that's almost like table stakes, and you got to bring other stuff to the table. But I also love the point just about like putting yourself out there, like taking swings and having fun with it, and also like just adapting to the new platforms and the new opportunities that arise out there. I mean, for you and me, maybe it was social media and podcasting, or for me as well, and for you, blogging. But now the story I point to that came to mind as you were talking is Annie Agar. I think she might have done some work with Fox Sports, but for people that don't know, she just went viral early on with her hilarious dramatizations of Big Ten coaches meetings, especially during the pandemic. She just took off, and now has like a bunch of deals, and she's like a true influencer, and also just like a host and a creator and a broadcaster at times. Like, and so that's a really cool, I think, just manifestation of that, of like, you put yourself out there and you create something cool and something fun, like someone's gonna notice it. And look at her now. It's just insane.
Exactly, man. And this is the best time to do it. This whole content creator economy, right? In a way, or whatever you want to call it. But there's just a whole new opportunity thanks to social media, content creation, and you nailed it, man. And that's what it's all about. Just putting yourself out there, getting the reps in, refining your work, getting better. Of course, you got to network. I think the other big thing is just having good relationships, right? And really treating people well, whether you're interacting with randoms on Twitter or you meet them in real life. Like, just don't be I don't know if I could swear on your podcast or not, but just like, don't be an a-hole to people in general, right? Because it's such a small industry. No, you just never know. And again, I always go back to the 5 or 6 people that wrote me back when I wanted a job, and how all I did was tell them my story was nice, came across as a nice guy, and stayed in touch with people. Didn't want anything from them, just had to ask for advice, and they remembered me, thought of me, and found ways to give me jobs. And even to this day, I'm still cool with and close with all those people, and we still talk, and they still find ways to give me jobs, right? And so if you come across as an a-hole early on, and you just never know. That other person is going to ascend in the space, and there might come a day where they're going to be the ones that have openings on their squad to try to get, potentially could have given you a job, but they're like, hey, we don't like this person, right? And so I think relationships are super important, and just putting yourself out there. Those are probably the two biggest things right now.
No, it's so well said, and what I love even more that it's coming from you, because and it means more, because everyone says, oh yeah, like be good to people, network, reach out, start doing something, put yourself out there. But like all these lessons are things that you've done, like you actually did it, and it has worked for you. You created content, you made relationships, you treat people well, and so I love that it's not just like blowing smoke. It's truly like learning from experience, and like those lessons matter. But,
yeah, they do. And then here, to your point, man, like, yes, we hear these kind of like fluff things all the time on the internet, right? And when you're in, you got to put, everybody's different. You got to put yourself in people's shoes. Of course, to some, they're just like, hey, this is BS. Like, I work hard, I'm smart. What's going on? Why can't I get this opportunity, right? But trust me, I've seen it from the ground up as someone that pivoted careers and am in the space now. It does work, but it's a grind. It's tough. You're going to get rejected a lot. I think that's the other big thing is I was rejected a ton of times before I got this job at Fox Sports. And you have to, as much as it sucks, and again, I have a family. I'm a little older than a lot of people trying to get into the space, right? And so for me, every time I got rejected, it was, should I even be doing this, right? And so I have an IT degree. I have entrepreneurship experience. I got my MBA from University of Illinois. It's like I can go out and probably get a job, because at some point I started feeling guilty as well, right? So I have this amazing wife that's like supporting me mentally and financially. And once you have kids in a home, bills add up. So
yeah,
it's important to, stay strong kind of through the downs. But now that I'm here, I look back on a lot of things. I do realize all those rejections were actually pretty good things. Like, I didn't have any experience, but I would come runner up or third person out for a job, which were pretty good gigs, right? And so now that I look back on it, they were all pretty good learning experiences. I am still friends with a lot of those people. I learned how to interview. I learned how to put together my resume. When I didn't get the jobs, those people were nice enough to explain why. And I think, again, it's just really sticking with it. And it's all not just fluff stuff that people say, but half of the stuff about the space is just being resilient and kind of keep showing up in a way, right? Like if you can show up 80% of the time, I think and just do a good job and be nice. I think you can persevere and definitely find a place in the industry.
Oh, good stuff. Talking here with Vic Choxy, and just inspiring us every single time. He's senior editor of gambling with Fox Sports. So let's talk a little gambling, Vic. Tell me, like, how did you were you always kind of a little bit interested in the gambling side of things or the fantasy side of things, or did you have to, really learn the space and teach yourself and not just how things worked, but also how to promote it, how to engage around it, how to create content around it? So tell me about like your history with gambling in general and fantasy, and how you've got to where you are today with really being senior editor of gambling at Fox Sports.
Yeah, definitely, man. Not a great story, but definitely started gambling when I was super young, man. In high school, we're doing, I was making pools by hand, and we're doing fantasy football. This is before Yahoo actually had all of this set up, right? This is a long time ago, man. That's what I'm telling you. I'm a little older than you for sure, but yeah, playing Monopoly for money, just doing different things. Where I got into the game, and I didn't start betting on sports until probably college. And so this is the time again where it wasn't legal. So you're sending money offshore via Western Union. Anybody that's done it understands what I'm talking about, but sending money to like Jamaica essentially to log into a website. And so I've been gambling for a long, long time. And so same thing with fantasy, man. I remember fantasy when it was done by hand. And then when I was in college, Yahoo started, and I was hooked. I was one of those guys that did like 47 leagues at one time. I loved it. I loved fantasy basketball. I love fantasy football. and literally took it really seriously, probably until I had my second kid, which is just recently, But I think the second kid and the pandemic and everything made me a little soft. Now I'm not as cutthroat, but just love fantasy, love gambling, and I knew it was going to be a big industry, and so that's why even on Doc Squad, I would post gambling picks. I would write about gambling. I would talk about it. I would do the same on Twitter. It was just something inside of me. I knew everybody did it, but it was kind of taboo at the time, right? So, but everybody that I asked, everybody that I talked to, whether it's a college kid or an older person, you're watching a game at a bar or you're watching it with your buddies, everybody had some money on it, whether that's $5 or $500. I knew people were gambling. I would go to Vegas and I would see how insane it was. And so I knew it was only a matter of time. And that's why, I started writing about it. I think J Max saw the same thing. And so he wanted us to write about it at the Big Lead as well. And even when I kind of moved on from there, I started to keep that up. I made that one of my niche things on Twitter as well. And again, just blogged about it, talked about it, jumped on people's podcasts about it. Because I do think even back then I knew it was going to be really big, and I'm glad I did that. But yeah, I've been a degenerate gambler myself, and then just when it comes to the content side of things, really, I started with the blog and then really got into it at the Big Lead.
So, and we almost take for granted, or in some cases, like when you were blogging or even now, of hey, like I can write and use this terminology or talk about this aspect of gambling and take for granted that people will know what I'm talking about. But now we have this new world where, the goal for all these companies throwing around tons of money to try to get those first time deposits and try to get those gamblers that can hopefully be with their brand for life. It's a balance of, hey, I want to talk to the avid gamblers that know everything and I don't want to talk down to them. But I also want to, welcome in the casual people. I don't want to alienate them and make it feel like it's too complicated to understand all these things. Like people that may not even know what a money line is, or may not know what prop bets are, parlays are. So how do you go about thinking about dealing with those two audiences? Is one more valuable than the other? Is one more receptive to content than the other? And you have to really think about it in that bifurcated fashion.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's crazy to think even back in, until 2018, you couldn't really even say or write a lot of the things that we do now, right? Mm-hmm. And when it comes to football, they couldn't talk about it on TV. And now, like you said, everybody's talking about it. The NFL posted a job for VP of betting today. I think VP of gambling themselves.
Wow.
And the landscape has changed so much. And in regards to the demographic, I truly think it all depends where you work, but when it comes to companies that are getting into content themselves, I think that for most of those companies and Fox as well, we are just trying to talk to kind of the new gambler, right? The casual gambler, the guy that's going to be watching the game on his couch, throwing $5 or $10 on the game and having some fun with it. So I kind of liken it to watching a movie, right? We pay $10-15 to go watch a movie. We have fun for 2 or 3 hours. And this is kind of the same thing. We're watching something fun. And then on top of that, you have an opportunity to actually win money off of it, right? And so that's kind of how I see it in my mind. That's our strategy. So a lot of the stuff that we do is more for the casual gambler. I think the hardcore gamblers, the ones that are betting huge amounts of money, they're not really coming to a lot of these media company websites and reading about their content, if that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. They have algorithms and they're professionals and they're betting on this and they're making their livelihood is at stake. This is their job essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a whole different demographic. Now, it will be interesting to see how the space goes in the next few years. I think the biggest thing that we're seeing with sports books or media companies or anyone is stickiness, right? Especially when it comes to these sports books. I think there's no brand loyalty. It's whoever has the best promo or, the best boost for today. That's what at least my buddies who are casual bettors, that's what they do. So in Illinois, we have, now we have like 8, but I think at the beginning it was just DraftKings, FanDuel, Bet Rivers. And on that day, whoever had the best promo, that's who they would bet with, right? And so it'll be interesting to see. And same thing with media companies. There's so many companies trying to get into the space, but not everyone's going to last, right? There's a lot of companies are going to burn out. And so I do think in a couple of years, you're probably going to just see a great consolidation. And I think that's already began. And so we might just see the big guns that make it through the next couple of years. But I hope that answers your question a little bit.
Oh, totally. Do you think then, like, what does and what will like ultimately win the betting audience, and especially the casual bettors that you mentioned that you're going after, the newbies, so to speak, are like, I ask that because I think we're all anticipating, okay, what's going to happen when Adam Schefter's contract comes up, and all the talk around these gambling companies thinking that if we get the Schefters, the Wojs, whoever, if we get the information brokers on our platforms, then that's how we're going to attract all the betting audience to us. But is it really just, that's great, we're going to get the Schefter tweet or whatever, and we're going to love that, but are the bettors ultimately going to say, okay, we're still going to go after who has the best promotion or has the best odds for us? Like, how is that information brokerage like really as powerful as some of the media outlets are making it out to be?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think two things. One, the people that last to me are going to be either the ones that build the best community, that have the best way of having fun, which Barstool, I think, does really well, right? They have a really intense community. Whether you love or hate Barstool, their followers ride or die with their personalities. And it's because they've built kind of this family community where people ride and lose bets together, right? Or they win together. And so I think companies like that will do well and stick around. And then I do think Fox and you're seeing ESPN, they're going to ramp up pretty soon getting into the gambling space. But those two have differentiators because they have TV rights, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have the ability to stream on an app while also placing live betting or micro bets or, whatever you want to call it. But you'll be able to wager while you're watching these games on their apps. So I think that gives them a big leg up. And then DraftKings and FanDuel have built a pretty strong user base. So that's kind of one way, or that's how I see who I see laying around. And then when it comes to information, man, trust me, I've tried to do it all aside from work when it comes to gambling. Like, I've known when quarterbacks are going to be out. I've known when point guards are going to be out of the game. And I've beaten numbers by 6, 7, 8 points because of that information and then still lost bets. Right. And so, and second of all, these odds makers, and the people that set these lines, and then the ones that automatically do it with softwares, they're just so sharp. They get the same information probably sooner than everybody, right? And so a lot of those times, those numbers are already baked in. And so even if you have information, it doesn't guarantee success in the gambling space, if that makes sense. And so I do think there is some value, and I do think one of the big insiders will get into the game eventually, probably over the next 2 years, whether that's Woj, Shams, Ian Rappaport, somebody in the game. But personally, I don't think there's a lot of value in it from a gambling perspective, but from a media perspective, from being a company side, I see a whole ton of value because they will then be able to do exclusive posts about those kind of things, and that will drive a lot of traffic to their websites, right? Or whatever platform they're trying to push people to. So I see the value in that for sure. I just don't personally see a lot of value in it from a gambling perspective if I was a gambler, but I do think one of those big guns is going to make a move in the next year or two.
Hope you enjoyed that. Again, I recommend listening to that full episode. Vic is full of good insights and knowledge, has been in the space for a long time, and is a big part of where it's going as well. And you can check out some of the work he's doing right now, of course, on The Athletic in their sports betting vertical. Next up on the Best of the Social Media Sports podcast. If you don't know her, you should. If you've heard of her, you know she is very well respected, very well loved, all for good reason. Next up, you're going to hear from Amy Keene. She came up with the Carolina Panthers, got really big, started her career, as you'll hear in this part of the podcast, a little bit later. She started out as a teacher first, and then made her way to the Panthers and just took off right away. Became really one of the thought leaders in the space, has helped so many people around her, including me, I can say. Today, she is the co-founder and at Hat Trip. They do a bunch of stuff around content and social, building up creative teams. When we spoke, she was head of community for Gondola, which you have likely heard of. Today, again, doing great stuff with Hat Trip. And in this part of the podcast interview, you'll hear what it's like for her being a leader of a team. You know, as she grew in her role with the Panthers, helping others rise up as well, helping lead others, selling in ideas to senior leadership, and being able to take swings and drive innovation in that role. Just lots of good stuff. And listen up, here is part of my interview with Amy.
I actually pulled something that I learned when I was a teacher, was a veteran teacher, had pulled me aside because I was struggling as a beginning teacher. I did a program called Teach for America. So my background wasn't in teaching, and they're like, but you're a smart person, you'll be able to figure it out, like just with some coaching. And it was a lot of coaching that I needed. And I taught middle school, so it was even more like super fun. If you remember your awkward middle school years, I was super awkward. But a veteran teacher had told me that like when you can sense, especially as a teacher, like leading a classroom, if you feel like you need a reset, and have a reset with your class, is to talk to them, tell them honestly what you're feeling, and reset. And like then hold up to your new bargain. And if you have to do another reset, do another reset. So at the Panthers, I think that's what I started establishing. Like I often would be like, if I felt like things were like not grooving in the right way, I'd be like, all right, cool. Let's all get together. Let's talk about it. Is there something that I'm doing? Is there a process that needs to be rehashed out? Like, is someone just kind of needs a break? Like, let's talk this out so we can fix it. And it's not that big of a deal. So I started trying to make those conversations happen often, as many times as we needed, to be like, okay, let's reset. Like, let's figure this out, and not to have things I think a lot of times people like let things keep going on. And I know I've been guilty of that for too long. And then it gets like way out of hand. You're like, whoa, we could have fixed this way back over here. So, that's a big thing of a leader for me, was like someone willing to call out like, okay, it seems like either morale wise, content wise, just like the process of how we're managing projects, like do we need to reevaluate something? So I always was fine with reevaluating something, even if it was a process that I loved, and they're like, this isn't working. Okay, cool, let's figure out a new way to do this. And so I think that was the big thing. And then is learning. Another thing from teaching was I knew, I don't know why I didn't register, but as a teacher, I never taught the same way to every student, right? Like it wasn't like I wasn't a homogenous person that's like, this is the only way, right? I knew some students needed a little bit more attention. Some students were like, I'm good. You don't need to help me. Yeah. Let me do my work and leave me alone. Didn't want to talk. There's some students that like you really had to reinforce with positive affirmation, like, pep them up a little bit. So once I realized that, and how I led, and where I felt like I was hitting my stride, was when I was leading where not everyone got the same Amy. Like some people just wanted to be like, hey, I'm good, approve my budget, let me go. And other people needed like some nurturing, which was fine, because that's the type of leader I am. I always tell people like I'm a Pisces, I'm an empath, like I really care about people deeply. So that was an easy thing to like click once I got it. And you said earlier of like that's how I felt like I was being my full self, is when I was leading and helping others. And so it was a perfect fit for Gondola, when I was like, how do I take what I'm doing here at the Panthers and, magnify it on a larger scale and get to do that with more people? Like that to me is like the dream. So I'm really living the dream.
Yeah. And it's cool to think about how Gondola is helping to capture. It's not just the person that presses send, or it's not just the person that exports out of Adobe or whatever. It truly takes an army to create something really special and really awesome. And you think about that from those of us who spent time on the team side or work with a team to execute an organization strategy. And there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen then. And someone might think, okay, I'm going to create this fire graphic and it's going to perform so awesome. But then you might look at it and be like, well, it doesn't really align with our brand strategy or what we're trying to accomplish. And there's so many. It's tough to have that cohesiveness and making sure that, yes, this is objectively a great piece of content, but there's also like, is it objectively a great piece of content in as much as what we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish? And you guys hit a lot of home runs with the Panthers, like so many, it's crazy. I can't even list them all. So when you go about trying to hit those home runs and trying to drive success, that it truly is aligned throughout the organization. What does that look like in practice? And what were some lessons you learned along the way? And how did you hit those square up those pitches? I love my baseball analogies.
I love them too. I think I said grand slams earlier.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just want baseball to be back. So what I think is, I know this keeps kind of going back to like I've said, like people first, but like, and that's the type of person I am, but I really do think it all starts with people. Because you can have the most talented videographer, you can have the most talented photographer, but if it's not a cohesiveness, as best as you can on a team level, especially on like a physical team, like the, like the NFL, it's just not going to work. So I think that the Panthers got in our stride was a few couple things. Is we tried, not everything was perfect, but we did try to like have fun. Like a lot of things we would make content for, like did that make Brandon Johnson, our videographer, laugh? Did Carson Smucker, our videographer, think this is funny? Like did Angela on our team laugh at this? Daniel, like et cetera, Chanel, like, so a lot of like our content, we tried to like, if we kind of thought it was funny and like cheeky, like maybe other people would. So
yeah,
the first thing we did was like trying to stop being like, I want to make this badass piece of content, which is also important, but is just to try to have more fun with it. I think sometimes we can take things too seriously in the content space. And that's okay. At the Panthers, and like how I always kind of like felt like our voice was something that like you could kind of poke fun at yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
So like we often would like make content that like maybe wasn't super polished and didn't always have like the most like pristine look. Like it was a meme that we saw. We really tried to have fun with it. If we laughed at it, if someone on our team thought this was funny, like we always try to send content. We had a channel, a Slack channel that was called the meme team, where like we would just send content all the day, like make ourselves laugh. We would make it. And I think that was the funnest thing of like how we had so many home runs, as we've been talking about the baseball analogies, is because we tried to have fun ourselves and like make our team laugh. That like then we had set the precedent that like, okay, like we're gonna try it. The Panthers team like always would hear me say this, so like, okay, let's try it. Like, and let's watch the comments like hawks, like I always would post stuff, or like we would post stuff, I shouldn't say like, but I would always be like, yeah, let's post it. But like, let's immediately get the feedback from people. And if it's not a hit, let's just take it off. But if it is a hit, like, let's find out what did we do there that we can like try to capitalize again on. So I know a lot of teams like to keep like a beautiful IG aesthetic, and that's totally fine. Our Panthers brand was not following that. Like we just wanted to hit you with the fun content, and so I think that's what we really create a safe, fun place to. I don't want to say fun again, but that's the word I'm coming up with. So
how did that work in tandem, or not in tandem, but in alignment with your bosses, with with what everyone else in the organization is doing? Were you guys able to say, hey, we have a great idea and this is why it makes sense to execute, or even looking at like, we can have some fun and this is like our 20% of just like short-term stuff, or short form stuff that we can just poke around with, but with the stuff that we're going to spend a lot of hours producing, like we need to really sit back and see how this aligns with how we're allocating resources, time, et cetera, et cetera. So like ultimately, how much was it a director from top saying, here's our top line goals, now go for it however you see fit, versus being a little more micromanaging?
Well, I think I got really lucky with the ownership group that came in when I was there, which was David and Nicole Tepper. They like, David and Nicole are like super personable. I don't even know why I'm saying David. I call him Dave, but they're so personable that they loved our content. Like they would see stuff and we'd get a text message being like, oh my gosh, this was so funny. Or like, I love this, like laughing, crying emojis. So like we really felt, our team really felt pretty empowered that like, okay, if the ownership group is being like, yes, you guys are kind of funny, like keep it up, then it really enticed us to kind of keep momentum. And obviously like, you know, when you are organically making fun content and you're hopping on trends that like make sense for the brand, like it shows up in the numbers. And we had created such an established voice on social that people were like, oh, I want to see what the Panthers do. Totally. So it became expected that like we were getting great numbers because we were doing something that was like fun and different and like people really liked that. So we got really lucky, and Bill and Steven, who are our bosses for a good chunk of that, like they were amazing to be like, hey, we have this idea, little weird, but like let us explain. And they'd be like, okay, try it. Like similar to what I said, let's try it. Let's view the comments instantly and see, like get that feedback from people. So we were lucky, and that's why I think the Panthers are like a special place where you have like an owner and that's like, oh, I get this. I like funny things on the internet. So
what were your tips? How did you have success getting the players involved too? Because you guys had some great content that certainly the players more than played along with.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny. A few times, like, you know, the Panthers currently, like the stadium is where the players work out. That's their facility. And also where like the internal staff work. And a lot of times before COVID, when we would have moments like running each other into the parking lot, a few times it was really funny of like free agents were coming through and like seeing if they wanted to work with, you know, come to the Panthers or come to another team. And I know like Gerald McCoy, who was being recruited at the Panthers at one point, and he ended up coming here. That I saw, we were at the same time we were coming by, and like Olsen and Keekly and all of them are trying to get him to come, and they're like, oh, this is the best social team, you gotta come. And awesome. So like that was pretty cool to be like, okay, people really like that they think like they know, players know like we're gonna have fun. So maybe it's like a little bit of a nudge to be like, we are a good place to come. So that's really cool. So and the players, like I think because we often like made them look good or like we're funny, that they liked doing content with us. So we had like such a great group of like content creatives, like I mentioned earlier, like Carson, Daniel, Angela, like Chanel currently, and Alex. Like people want to work with them because they make them look good and they do good content. So it's fairly easy nowadays. So we're lucky.
I love that. Tell me, a few minutes left here with Amy Keene, head of community at Gondola. We have so much more to talk about. This is so much fun. How much did you not necessarily coordinate or work with, but pay attention to what other creatives or other social teams were doing in the NFL and other sports? How much was it of, hey, we're going to do our own thing and not worry about what other people are doing, versus, hey, that's a good idea, how can we adapt that? And also even just having those active conversations and learning from each other, that sense of community among all the social sports folks.
Oh yeah, I always looked at what other teams are doing. Like Megan Julian at the Chargers, like oh my gosh, chef's kiss, like what she's been able to do, and now she has like a whole squad of like an all women team, which I love.
Yeah.
I always be like, dang it, the Chargers, this is so good. This is so good. I wish I thought of it. And even like Zach Gallia, like at the Cardinals. So a lot of times I 100% always looked at what other teams did. And I would say probably early in my career was a lot of jealousy to be like, oh, we got to top that. We got to top that. And a lot more wiser in my years later on, I'd be like, just excited that someone did something cool on the internet, like because I know how much work it takes sometimes even get things posted nowadays. You mentioned like approval processes. So like, I'm like, oh, good for them. So, and I think because I've been in business now, even though it doesn't seem like that long, I'm only 34. I have been, so almost 10 years now officially in the sports world. So it's been really like fun to like also be friends with people. So I'm in a lot of text groups where we talk through things of like, hey, has you ever happened to this before? Or like, you know, ideas on this. So I like seeing other people have success. So I would say I'm now not jealous.
As you could probably tell, Amy's personality just shines through those interviews, and really enjoy connecting with her and keeping in touch with her over the years, and being able to say hey to her in person as well at a gondola event not terribly long ago. And she's just doing tremendous stuff now with Hat Trip, helping leagues and teams of all sorts really step up their social media game and helping staff, creators, lots of good stuff that Amy's doing now. But I highly recommend listening to that full interview because we just barely scratched the surface with that portion. So check out that podcast interview. Again, we'll link up the full episode in the show notes. Next up on the Best of Digital Social Media Sports podcast, man, did I really enjoy listening back to this interview. I forgot how great it was and how smart this dude is. Next up, you're going to hear from Perry Mattern. At the time that I spoke to him, he was senior manager of social media for the New York Jets. Today, he is director of basketball social media for Brooklyn Sports Entertainment Global, covering the Brooklyn Nets as well as the Barclays Center, among other properties, but really with a focus on the Nets, of course, with basketball social media. Just really smart dude. And in this part of our interview, you're going to hear about what it was like with the Jets preparing and executing during the NFL draft, and also really good insight into crafting and executing and activating the New York Jets' distinct voice and brand. Something that's a very important subject, and Perry's super insightful on it. So listen up. Here's my part of my interview with Perry Mattern.
You think, like, going into that, in an ideal world, yeah, your hands aren't going to be as dirty, and you're going to spend a lot of time strategizing and planning to make the best content possible. And certainly that exists. But, there are, and you listed off a lot of those things already, but there are a lot of things that you're doing on a daily basis that you find yourself looking at the clock and it's 3:30 and it's like, I didn't really actually think about, what we can do from a specific, post by post perspective. And, my team, Kylie and Melissa, the two women on my team have done a great job, and they've grown so much. They're really young, only about a year into this. So, it kind of depends on what your team is too, right? So like a lot of this first year as a manager has been, helping them develop to the best that they can be too. Because I think really, you're nothing without your help. And if I don't spend time making them the best that they can be, it's a disservice to not just myself, but to them. And so
right.
That's been a lot of, but as now we are at a point where they are fully antiquated to what we're doing, that they're able to handle all of their tasks themselves. And this off season has been really kind of a joy for me, because this is the first off season where we're not hiring somebody to the team, right, where everyone's kind of in their spots and they know what they're doing. And it has given me more time to do a lot of that strategy and planning. And, we do a lot of this based around the tentpole kinds of things, like, okay, what are we going to do for the combine? How are we going to attack the combine? Not just from a social perspective. Well, what we are going to do from a social perspective and what we can do from just our 3-person social team. But then let's go talk to the other members of the content department that, goes 15 deep. How can they help? And what are their goals that they're trying to achieve? And it's the combine, then it's free agency, then it's the draft. And, I think everyone knows that calendar. So, but there is still just, that when it comes to the reporting, the data reporting and working with our business analytics team, and then the sponsorship aspect, they're doing recaps, right? And they're going out to market now to try to sell for the 2022 year. And, we have to be sharp. If we're not sharp with making sure that all of our end, we're holding up our end of the bargain, they're not going to be very happy with us. And there's just, there's little things that come up each day. And I know you already kind of dropped the hint on one of them, where you're going to have to drop everything you're doing and go try to prepare for this instead. But it's amazing. I never considered myself a very organized person. Growing up, I'm 29 now, and I feel like I'm finally actually getting to a place where I'm, semi-organized. And man, that is to have at least 1 or 2 organized people on your social team is so important. And because the preparing for the unprepared is what it's all about, especially when it comes to social and sports. And I find that to be, what I have tasked myself with is preparing us 3 for preparing for the unprepared. And, the more that we can have in the can already, idea wise, execution wise, it just makes us even more nimble when things come out of nowhere.
I love it. There's so many directions I want to go, Perry. But let's jump on that last point really quickly about the need to be prepared, the need to be able to react on a dime, to turn on a dime, whatever phrase you want to use. Like, how can you sort of be prepared for the unexpected, or be prepared to be ready? Like, are you guys creating almost like skeleton plans or skeleton content even of saying, okay, if this kind of thing goes down, trade, injury, whatever, a major game, historical milestone, or whatever it might be, like put this plan into action, or like what are those steps you can take to make sure that everyone kind of knows what to do with man their battle stations if something big does go down that catches you off guard a little bit?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts of the job, because it's just certainly, if something exciting is happening, it's, naturally exciting. But I think it's, you kind of have preparation for things that are going to happen. And that I think allows you to and I think this goes back to my point of being organized. I think people just think better when they aren't scrambled, right? I mean, I know that's a pretty obvious statement, but when a Sunday starts or night one of the draft starts, things are going to fly.
Yeah.
If you're not ready, then it's going to be really tough. Now, I know all 31 of my counterparts, social teams in the NFL, are ready for every night. Now, what I want to do is be ready on top of that for what happens if we trade up, what happens if we trade back,
right,
what happens if we trade for a player, and all 31 other teams, all 32 teams are going to have their graphics ready. They're going to be ready to, but when you are truly comfortable and confident in your plan, I feel like your brain is much more open to things that can happen. So I'll give actually a good example is the draft for us last year. And we were really, really prepared for the draft. And, we picked 2. And part of the reason that we were probably really prepared was because we picked number 2 and we knew it was Zach. So
right,
we didn't have to worry about creating 16 graphics for 16 different possibilities. We knew, Jags were going to pick Trevor and we were going to pick Zach. Mm-hmm. So when the clock opened, or when the draft, 5 minutes before the draft opened, we were just kind of actually relaxing. And I said,
yeah,
what if we just said, well, as soon as the draft opened, we just tweeted, all right, at Jaguars, hurry up. And I ran it to my boss and he was like, yeah, I don't have, why would I have a problem with that? I was like, all right, we'll do it. As soon as the draft opens and the Jags are on the clock, we'll tweet it. And it was our third most liked tweet last year, something like that. It had 22,000 likes or something like that. And then the other one would be a little bit later in the draft. We had actually already had a meme prepped, and it was oh my gosh, what's the character's name from The Wire? Oh man, I can't. I'm probably going to think of his name as I'm telling the story, but he has the meme that says, "I want you to put word back out put word out there that we're back up." And because we had a second first rounder, so I was like, yeah, we'll tweet that when we're back up, because literally we are back up.
Yeah.
And our pick was 23, and but instead we ended up trading up to 14. I was like, oh my gosh, the wire meme, we got to tweet it. And it was great. People went nuts for it. And Stringer Bell is the character's name. So I finally thought of it. But we had just kind of had that ready, and it was it worked out super well. And it was funny because the timing was actually pretty amazing, because around that time we had kind of finally finished all of the Zach stuff from picking at number 2, and everyone had just taken their first breath, and then we looked up at the TV and we're like, wait, we're on the clock right now? What is going on? And then it was a mad rush again. So that's a matter of being prepared. And we didn't we knew we were going to have a second first round pick, but we didn't know we were going to trade up, and so that stuff materializes really quickly, and you just kind of have to be ready. So I'm a big believer on that stuff.
Yeah, all of a sudden you get into the 2-minute offense, and you got to be ready to go.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
I think it's everyone kind of knows and accepts and enjoys the fact the NFL is a year-round league at this point, with tentpole events being very much a part of the picture, and the NFL is doing a good job of creating more tentpole events, whether that's combine, draft, free agency, schedule release, et cetera. So as you guys head into that kind of environment, hey, the draft is coming, or whatever, a schedule release is coming, how do you look at what ultimately comprises a successful strategy, successful outcome for you guys on the social media side? I think even just thinking through your draft example of having that meme ready, saying, hey, we're going to use a meme, and this is going to help us kind of relay our brand a little bit on a day we have more attention to more attention of our fans than we usually do? Are you thinking about, hey, let's maximize our sponsor exposure and monetization? Let's maximize our data capture opportunities, our follower growth, our engagement, our video views. Like, what are you thinking about as you're building that strategy and collaborating within everyone else in your team?
I think first things first, we're thinking about engagement pretty much at all times, because if engagement still is going to solve so many other issues, or if engagement's high, then that most likely is going to lead to, the other things kind of taking care of themselves. I'm a little bit of a believer now, and certainly there's a lot of evidence to back it up when we talk about follower growth. I think TikTok perhaps is off to the side. I think, it's been proven that winning isn't going to necessarily correlate with you on TikTok. We've seen that the Detroit Lions, for example, are one of the most followed TikTok teams in the league. And, they have the number 2 overall pick this year. So that team's done an incredible job on TikTok. And, but then someone like, you see what the Bengals have done, they've done a great job, given certainly a lot to work with, but they were ready too. And there's a lot of correlation with winning and stuff, but you got to be ready. We talk about it all the time. We're ready to win here. We know our content team is ready to win. There's no doubt about it. So I think we when we prepare for all these tentpole events, we look back and say, when we get ready for the draft this year, and we've already started doing this, is look at, okay, what worked last year, what worked in 2020, what worked in 2019. Those are the 3 years that I've been here. And also that's kind of the analytic providers have gotten better and better over that time. So it's easier to go back to, we'll use, I'm a big fan of CrowdTangle's interface when it comes to that kind of thing. You can look at what the overperforming posts were in that time, not just for yourself, but around the league and stuff. So, using that stuff and saying, okay, all right, here's the stuff that we know works, right? We already have in place that is going to work. This is our bread and butter. Obviously, you're going to have to post a graphic for whoever we draft, right? But what are the other things that would work for all of these different situations? And this year, we've actually been talking about it. We picked number 4. We picked 4 and 10. And, last year, we knew we were picking Zach. And the year before, we knew we were probably taking an offensive lineman. And the year before that, it felt like it was going to be Quinnen almost no matter what. So this is the first year where we really have no clue who we're going to pick. So we're going to have to talk about a lot of different people at 4 and say, all right, if this guy's the pick, what will we do with him? Is this guy's the pick? Is there something fun internet culture wise we can do with him? Things we need to know about, their history and things of that nature. So it's just thinking about it. That's what's really cool about it. And I've thought about this a lot now, where it's funny. This is really the first off season, and this is my 5th season in the league, and my 3rd and a half, I guess, doing social only, that I feel actually comfortable, because now you've actually been through it 3 different times, and one of those times being completely virtual, and you feel like you really are comfortable with kind of knowing what the bread and butter is innately. And then you get all that stuff out of the way. And then you just start working on, okay, what's the stuff that takes us to another level? What's the stuff that sets us apart when we have eyes on ourselves on these big nights? Like you were saying, how do we set ourselves apart in those spaces without abandoning who we are? And that's, I feel pretty blessed here to have a pretty willing, staff that is on my team, but then also the people that I report up to as well, pretty open to us, having fun and really developing a voice that is both relatable. I feel weird saying on trend, but on trend and we'll cut through the noise a little bit and cut through what the normal things you would see from these teams at these temple events.
Yeah. And when you have those moments, then are you and it's probably a little more reactive than anything else and just trying to maximize engagement, whatever that might mean at the time. But there's ways you can go about it. There's hey, do we want to focus on what this player, to use the drafting example, what this player means to us from X and O's perspective, and why it means the Jets are more likely to win games and you should be excited, versus, hey, let's lean on this player's backstory and get the fans to fall in love with the individual, with the player, with Quinnen Williams saying "God bless you" to himself or whatever. Or there's also the element of maybe, hey, let's make sure that we convey the brand that we want to get out there, our voice, the types of memes we use, how we talk about ourselves and about players. Are all those elements kind of, and other ones as well, kind of bouncing around in your head as you guys execute both extemporaneously and in real time, or is there really some elements that tend to resonate best with fans in those moments?
I think the one thing that we have kind of continually come back to, and more recently have talked about this more, is the idea of entertaining instead of informing. And I think, there's sometimes like that we are going to inform just naturally, like we're going to tell you who we picked in the draft, right? But, when we talk about like, what does this mean for our team? And like, we're going to talk, like if it's an edge rusher, we're going to talk about like, oh, like, this guy's like, we're going to get excited about it, but we're also not going to sit here and, tweet that, he won on like 43% of his pass rush snaps a year ago. I think the one thing that I've come to know a little bit is, especially in the New York, the New York market is actually a little bit more, it's a little more prevalent here than maybe smaller markets, is that we have a large press contingent, right? Like you can go get your information about the team in a lot of different places, the Athletic, the New York Post, the New York Daily News, the NJ Media. Like if you want information, like breakdowns and like legit opinions about the team that, is not like one-sided, like obviously we're going to be a little bit biased. So they're going to go get their information out there. Like if they want their information, they can go over there. If you want to be entertained and see the draft call and see the guy visiting the facility for the first time and like meeting, our coach and Joe Douglas, like you're going to come to us and we're going to entertain you with this cool stuff of, this guy being mic'd up, like for his first time being in the building and things of that nature. And, him, with Zach last year, when Zach got picked, we found a video that we wanted to stitch. We actually put a call out to like people on TikTok and said, like, stitch this with a welcome to our first round pick. And like, he might stitch you back. And we did that with Zach. And like, he did a little stitch with this kid who was like so hyped that we had picked him. And so like, that's entertaining and connecting with the fan base. And I feel like being a part of the fan base is really important to us. And, we're never going to be 100% the fan, just like we're never going to be 100% the Jets and like this organization that maybe just posts and then walks away, right? Like we want to be a part of this fan base that is, dying of thirst for us to be successful. And, it's hard for us to be self-aware at all times. Like we can't always be that, especially when things, get really, really tough, but we want everyone to feel like, everyone that is a Jets fan, that that we care about them and we hear them, and that we're just like you. Like we want this thing to turn around too, right? And like we're really excited about these guys, like where this thing's headed, and what Joe Douglas is doing as the GM and what Robert Saleh is doing as the head coach. So making them feel like we're part of that while also entertaining them is so important to us, because I really feel like doing informative things is just, it's by the wayside for what social is. People are on social for information, but like they're going to go get it from people that are meant to inform. And I don't necessarily think that teams are meant to do that anymore. I think we're meant to entertain.
Oh man, I just want to clip that last answer and listen to it over and over again. There's so much good stuff in there, man. A few minutes left here with Perry Mattern, social media manager for the New York Jets. Perry, I don't know how we're going to get through everything I want to get through, but we're going to try. You brought up TikTok, and I think to kind of like what you were alluding to earlier, TikTok, doesn't really matter how as much with your wins and losses. Heck, it may not even matter if the people viewing your content know you're a football team at times. It's a place that truly is a unique platform. Let's start to emanate elsewhere, of course, but just tell me about how the Jets look at TikTok and what you guys have found as successful, not successful, and ultimately what you guys want to get out of the platform, especially given that a lot of those views may come from people that, again, don't know you're a football team, or at least don't live anywhere near New York, or perhaps even the United States.
Yeah, it's man, it's hard. It's been the most challenging platform I've ever dealt with, and certainly the first one that's ever truly made me feel old. It just being 29, but I think it's kind of unpredictable at times. I think we've seen a lot of mic'd up stuff has worked really well there, and those are kind of easy wins. And I would being on trend, I think, is important, but it doesn't, if you can't be on trend organically, and if you feel like you're forcing stuff, like that audience is going to sniff that out from a mile away, like that you're forcing something and that you don't actually get what's going on, right? Like it's very much like if kind of platform, like people just aren't going to be interested. So it can be kind of tough at times to find your voice. And there's some other teams in our league. I mentioned the Lions already that do such a great job, and the Bills have done an incredible job on there as well. And I think we're kind of still in search for it. I'm not going to sit here and say we've got everything figured out on there, because we don't. And it's continually trying to. You feel like you're still playing a game of throwing stuff at a wall a little bit, right? And it's crazy that it's been around for almost 2 years now, or excuse me, almost 3 years now. And you're still like throwing stuff at a wall, right? Because there was things that worked in 2019 that don't work now, right? We put up, I remember we had 4 million views on a video of Le'Veon Bell at his press conference with his little girl, right? I'm not saying that wouldn't work now, but maybe it wouldn't. And we've had things. It's so funny because every time you think you probably don't. Like, you're publish something and you're like, yeah, that one's probably going to go pretty good, and then it's like, dang, it didn't do anything. And then next thing you're putting up one that you're like, oh, I like this, but maybe it might not go viral or anything like that. Next thing you know, it has hundreds of thousands of views, and you're like, man, I don't know how that happened. But I do think that the teams that have really found their voice on there and really found and the point you made was a really good one, where you almost forget that it's an NFL team is really, really important. And I'm really excited to see what we can do on there, because the one part of it that I really like and I think works well is just highlighting the personalities that we have here. And man, we have brought in some awesome personalities, especially in our draft last year, and I'm sure we'll do the same this year. So it just showing these guys in situations that isn't really football, I think is really, really good. I think people want to see what these people are like, and what they're interested in that isn't football, and things that, maybe you couldn't find elsewhere on regular TV or regular, even other social for that matter. So it's it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. But, we can't, certainly there's a lot of parts of TikTok. There's lots of areas of TikToks that we can't, dive into as just from like maybe an explicit point of view. But, there's still so many ways to engage the fan base and the future fan base there.
Really, really good stuff from Perry. And of course, now as part of that all-star team with Brooklyn Sports Entertainment, just a lot of good people there. And Perry just adds to that impressive lineup. So listen up to that full interview. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. Just lots of good insight on what it's like to run social for an NFL team. And of course, now he's doing great stuff in the basketball world. Last up, we saved a good one for last. You're going to hear part of my interview with Alex Servacio. This guy is just, every time you talk to him or hear from him or read him, he just has a lot of good lessons to share. He's been a big part of helping coaches in particular and executives as well, and really senior leaders learn the value and how to embrace these new and emerging digital and social platforms. And this part of my interview with Alex, you'll hear about his thoughts on athletes taking advantage of their brand platform and opportunities while they're in college, and also what it's like to get coaches truly bought in, other leaders, senior executives bought into these emerging digital platforms. So listen up, here's part of my interview with Alex Servacio.
The way you have to approach social media is, or any digital creation, that you're putting out there is, you have a job, whether it's to be a head coach or whether it's to lead a company or whatever it might be. Your day job is to succeed there. And I don't want social media or content to get in the way of what you're supposed to do to move that ROI. Mm-hmm. But if you own your time and own your schedule, and like I said, and you're putting out stuff that is honest and truthful to what you're actually doing, then the social media and the content part can become part of the process. It doesn't get in the way. It should amplify what you're doing and really return more value on what you're putting in, on your small network, whether it's, a small basketball team of 12 guys or girls, whether it's a small company with, 50 employees, or maybe it's a big company with thousands of employees. What you're doing internally, and you provide, an opportunity to really leverage social media's reach to anyone everywhere who wants to learn, be educated, or maybe buy your product, or, end up going to play for your school. So a lot of times, I think that coaches in general, athletes, they're building a brand on campus. I say it all the time. Like, when you're on, let's just say, University of Oregon's campus for 4 years, you could pick up the phone if you're playing basketball for Oregon or whatever major university it is, And major booster, a major donor will take your phone call because you are playing football for Oregon or basketball for Oregon. The minute you step off campus, unless you have that relationship or that one-to-one, or maybe you won the national title or whatnot, it's a lot harder for you to get in those doors and those phone calls and meetings. So the brand building process on campus, I think coaches are starting to understand that social media, yes, there's obviously negatives to everything. But there's a lot of positives there that with the right education, with the right system in place, with the right processes, whether the player becomes, an NBA, all-star or WNBA player, whatever it might be, there's going to be 98% others that go into real estate or investing, or they have a foundation or charitable cause that all are platform dependent and brand dependent, that hopefully you're leveraging your time while you're, a student athlete at a major university to develop that name, develop that brand. And ultimately, platforms come and go. You could have 100,000 followers on Instagram or 10,000 followers on this or that, and 10 years later that platform's gone. But if you become a local real estate agent or a local financial advisor, or you have a foundation or a charitable cause or a charity golf tournament, it's going to be, whatever you did while you were playing for that school is going to be impacted by the platform that you built, the audience that you were able to construct, and really the relationships that you were able to hopefully honestly build. So it's not a one-off transactional thing. It's a, hey, listen, how can I help you? I'm not expecting anything in return. And maybe 5 years later, there's something comes around that really syncs up with what they're doing. So yeah, I definitely don't think that conversation is necessarily happening as much anymore. I think coaches, you're seeing it now. There's educational components in the off season, making sure they know the do's and the don'ts, the best practices of how to leverage that. Some are better than others. Some athletic departments and schools are better than others. But I think everyone's cognizant that this thing is not going anywhere. Let's embrace it. Let's educate everyone on how to best utilize it. And let's be honest with ourselves that if we do it correctly, there's going to be some wins. And, unfortunately, there's always going to be, a negative connotation in the shadow. And you just have to ignore those and focus on what you can control.
Now, I want to kind of dive into so many different directions here, which is always a good thing, a good problem to have on the show. I think you look at coaches, for example, social media should not be seen, or same with executives or anyone, is not seen as something that gets in the way or a burden. It's if you want to make sure you're winning championships for the years to come and you want to recruit the best, part of your recruiting job is maximizing social. If you want to set up your athletes for success, if you're telling mom and dad that we're going to make sure that your son or daughter is going to be successful in life, part of it is helping them build a brand and maximizing that spotlight in that moment. And it seems like that's starting to become a selling point as much as anything, especially now in the quote unquote NIL era, which we can get into a little bit later as well. I want to touch on the athlete side, because I think you made a really great point there, especially for some of these college athletes in college in particular, or even pro sports with their shorter careers. They have that opportunity, that moment in the spotlight, the moment where they are the big man on campus, big woman on campus for however long they may have to maximize that opportunity. So when you're looking at what are the best ways to maximize in that window, take advantage of that window of building that brand that maybe transcends platforms, what goes into building that game plan, that strategy of really making sure that they, whether it's working with outside content producers or teaching them to produce content, finding what they're best at, finding what they're passionate about. What does it look like to take someone on and say, this is how we're going to make sure that we build your brand and not just your following?
Yeah, I think I always go back to, what is your passion? What gets you up in the morning besides, playing basketball or, playing soccer, or whatever it might be. Do you read books? Do you play video games? Do you want to design golf courses in your free time? Whatever it might be, everyone has something unique that is maybe a little quirky, or maybe a little that they don't share enough. But you got to lean into what makes you outside of the playing surface. And if you can do that, then that differentiates you from every other player and every other athlete on your team, on your school. And now with the ability, like I said before, I think the big problem that I see nowadays is the student athletes, they want to build their brand and grow their following, but they aren't taught how to create that content. They aren't taught how to pick up a Sony camera or Canon, shoot themselves, set up a tripod, then quick edit it, put it out there, produce, their own day in the life series on their Instagram. A lot of universities that have the budget, they have, the football team has a couple of video guys or whatnot, following them around, helping them do stuff. But a lot of the times I definitely think that it goes beyond that. Like if you love gaming, set up a Twitch channel, build that audience, lean into it. If you love reading, set up a book list, spin up an email newsletter. There's a lot of things that athletes should lean into that differentiates them beyond just, a double here, or, a touchdown here, whatever that might be. So I think the one thing I would say is, especially with NIL, the thing about NIL is a lot of these brands are coming to these athletes strictly as, hey, I want to pay you X amount of dollars to reach your followers on Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And if the athletes haven't, dedicated enough time to building, that following, that audience, that engagement, really, then they're leaving dollars on the table. So I think that a lot of that needs to go into the process of the athlete. The minute they step on campus is, yes, I'm here to first and foremost get an education. Second, to succeed at the sport that I have a scholarship or play. But third, I'm going to make the best of my time and create relationships and lean into my passions and develop myself as a human being and as a person. And, I just happen to play basketball or football or volleyball or whatever it might be. So, I always go back to more opportunity to create content, the better. We were speaking on the call before, I remember Gary Vee and D-Rock starting his vlogs, years and years ago. Mm-hmm. If everyone had a D-Rock following them around with a camera, and we could all put out the content that I'm always yearning for. But I know that's not possible. So you need to be strategic about what you're doing and what you're trying to shape and who you are, because at the end of the day, I always go back to it. You got to be honest. Like what they see out there, they need to see on, on social media, in person, on the playing field, in interviews, all that. Otherwise, the engagement won't be there. I see it all the time. You see it all the time, I'm sure. All these accounts, they have hundreds of thousands of followers and 2 comments or 8 likes and all this stuff. You have to, it's a two-way street. It's not just something that I build and forget. I have to build it and continue to get that instant feedback loop. Positive, and a lot of times negative. Hopefully ignore the negative, but use the positive as an opportunity to get better every day and continue to be a learner, whether it's getting better at your sport or, to read more books or develop your craft. That's going to happen when you retire from playing.
I love the lessons in that, and it's so important. And so it sounds less intimidating when it's like, hey, what do you love to do? Do that, and here's some ways to really maximize.
There's no wrong answer, Neil. That's the thing. I think a lot of times people are, as long as it's it's within reason. Like there's always right. There's always some that are out of bounds there. But I think people are worried, especially young kids are a little different nowadays coming up. The athletes that are getting recruited now are different than the athletes from 5 years ago, even. They're willing to put themselves out there and lean into maybe their unique passions in such a ways that was only maybe stuck in a subreddit that they read on their own. Now if you're into this or that, you can kind of talk more about it or lean into it, and hopefully maybe if it's something very unique. And I always go back to books, because I think books from an athlete perspective is something that just is an opportunity. It's very easy to pass a book to a teammate in the locker room. Hey, this really helped me think about this. And that might unlock something on the court or on the field that they never thought was in them. I just think that nothing's out of bounds necessarily in terms of how niche it can be. Just stay true to who you are and figure out the best way and the best people to surround yourself with to extract that out of yourself.
Totally. Differentiate yourself. And it's half the battle right there. Having a great conversation here with Alex Gervasio, founder of CBOS Consulting, also president of the Daily Coach. And I want to kind of talk a little bit big picture here of just where social media is at and how it fits into what we're seeing from athletes and coaches and among others and brands on social. Is this the idea of remarkability, or to use a less safe or less euphemistic term, inflammatory language or hot takes or savage content? Like what's it like if you see whatever? I'm trying to think of some good examples, like when Arkansas does their post game like football wins, when they have like their clever ways to show wherever Lane Kiffin train crashing. Like, what's that like for Sam Pittman? Is he part of that conversation? Most likely, is he saying just, hey, here's kind of the general sentiment that I'm cool with, you guys go with it? Same idea with like athletes as well, or coaches in general. Like, is there this inclination to, we have to do something that's a little bit against the grain, or not even against the grain, but a little bit like incendiary to get our message out there? And this is like the way it is now. Like, what should coaches and athletes make of that, and how are they currently encountering it, I guess?
I think it goes back to the same thing I was saying earlier. Like you have to be genuine about any response or anything you put out there. You can't, like, the minute you you're gimmicky or you're saying something you don't know what you're talking about, people see right through that. And then it becomes a negative. It detracts from the end goal that you're trying to get out there. It detracts from, obviously everyone's trying to cut through the noise. They're trying to get that engagement. They're trying to, rise above all the other content that's being put out there. But at the end of the day, there's something, whether, I always say this, whether you're an athletic program, a fan base, a team, even a family or a friend group, everyone's got these inside jokes or things that shared history that they yearn back and recall back to. Being able to say that in a way that everyone knows that, wow, okay, that person gets it, they're genuine, they're relating this back, it's going to cut through, it's a unique way. And really maybe it shows a side of the personality that you don't see in the post-game press conferences, they don't see on the field, they don't see in the tabloids and in the sports, in the beat writer stuff. So I get it. I understand it. I just go back to making sure if there is an opportunity to cut through the noise and make a comment or make something that is going to go potentially viral, just make sure it's who you are. And if someone asks you about it, you're like, yeah. We had some fun with it. What'd you think?
No, I think that as I think through some of the teams that are more likely to do that kind of quote unquote savage content, it generally does align with who their coach is. Like I think about the Auburn basketball fans who meme the hell out of their opponents when they lose. And Bruce Pearl, I could totally picture him being all about totally cool with that. And same idea with Sam Pittman in the Arkansas example I just gave, or Lane Kiffin and some of the stuff that they do on social with Ole Miss. And it's certainly it needs to be part of that brand, I guess, to your point. And is that more of the mandate now that the coaches that do have a little bit of swag, is swag a positive brand thing, or can you still be even Nick Saban is making little quips here and there nowadays. Do you need to be more than a coach or be more than a trust the process kind of coach to stand out these days and appeal to recruits?
Listen, I think first and foremost you're hired to do one job, and that's to hopefully inspire the student athletes that you're coaching. But at the end of the day, to win games and to build the program and to be the CEO of the program. A lot of things, I think a lot of people think that there's a lot of things that go into that become distractions from the reason that they hired you in the first place, to win games, to lead the program, to hopefully get a national championship. I personally am of the thinking, of the thought process that everything matters. Everything matters. If you don't treat everything as the most important thing to success, then you're going to miss something that could have helped you do something. People always say, I don't have time for social media. I don't have time to do this video. I don't have time to do this, all of that. You make your time. As long as there's a strategy in place and there's a thought process in place, there's no excuse for coaches, for players, to make sure that they have the time, that if this is going to help us win, or this is going to help us recruit this kid, or this is going to help us really just cut through the noise and get the brand out there, that, hey, this is a new, turning point. We're turning the page. It's a new program. We're going up. We're going to go for this or that. Then I think that you're missing out on something. I think you might look back and say, why didn't I do this? Or why did I miss this? And obviously there's priorities, and rightfully so. But the coaches and the programs that I see that downplay this or that and don't go attack it like everything truly matters are the ones that end up, cycling through coaches, cycling through, transfers and whatnot. There has to be, like I said, honesty with yourself that, hey, this is who we are. This is what we want you to be a part of. And this is about culture, whether it's an athletic program, whether it's at a startup business, a DTC brand, a major law firm, whatever it might be. You have to transfer that ownership of what you're doing, and everything we put out there and everything that we prepare for matters. And I think sometimes it gets lost in the bigness of the job. Rightfully so. I get it. These guys are getting paid millions of dollars. But you have to understand, how am I appealing to the next generation? How am I appealing to their decision makers, their mothers, their fathers, their grandmas? How am I appealing to the boosters? How am I appealing to the fans? And all of that, thankfully is kind of helped by digital, by social, by all these platforms that have unlocked a lot of value creation in the past 10 years that people just didn't have in the past.
And at the very least, too, a great positive thing as well coming out of this is, I think in the past it was almost glorified the guys that stayed in their office till 4 a.m. and then went home for 2 hours and came back at 7 a.m. and fired up the game film again. And it was this grinding culture that was glorified, and now it's you see coaches that are showing that, hey, our assistants go home at 6 to be with their family, or our assistants are we're not missing family events, or we have there's more to it than just the X's and O's. Like there's more to being a coach as a result of that, and it's good to be well-rounded. And I think that's hopefully something that will continue to thrive. And I want to get at you with this question as we come to our shareable stat here, is what does the coach of the present of the future look like? Like what will the the head coach in 10 years look like when they're coming in? Are they going to be a quasi influencer themselves and really get it? Are they going to be like someone that can inspire their students and will be doing dances on TikTok along with their student athletes? What are you looking for as you seek to help modernize what the position of a coach looks like in all capacities?
Yeah, I think the coach, the 21st century coach, is the CEO of the program. I think that the X's and O's is to some extent, obviously that's what got them there, but as Coach Raveling always says, what got you here is not going to get you where you need to go. So like, how do you continue to learn and continue to bring in those that are expertise in certain areas, whether it's social media, whether it's brand building, whether it's weightlifting, health, and diet and nutrition, all those stuff, they all go together. Like I said, everything matters. So I think going forward, you're gonna get the job because of what some coaches are expert in offense, defense, this or that. Some coaches are great recruiters, some coaches are this or that. It's more about self-leadership, I think, at that stage of how are you motivating, because let's be honest, all these kids are phenomenal athletes, but how are you unlocking in them what they can unlock themselves? And whether that's bringing in like a Ryan Holiday to speak to them about stoicism, or that's bringing in someone to speak about, their finances, or that's bringing in someone from Facebook and Instagram to talk about, best practices on the platform. I personally think the CEO has to set up for everything matters. The assistant coaches are there. You're building your staff. You're delegating those responsibilities. But at the end of the day, what are you doing to operate? A lot of people on Twitter will say, they always say, Jay Wright at Villanova, Fortune 500 program. How are you building that program as a Fortune 500 company? And I think, whether you're approaching that as a young coach or someone with a startup or someone that maybe just writes a newsletter or does a podcast, how are you running that and learning from that and facilitating, your own growth by people that you are consuming content with, or people you have on as guests, people you talk to, or who are you surrounding yourself with? So yeah, I mean, the long and short of it is, I'm not a coach, but the ones that have been around, the ones that I think that are going to, there's been a baton passing. You've seen Coach K is retiring, Coach Jay Wright is retiring. The whole generation is retiring. There's a new guard the next 5 to 10 years of guys that are going to take advantage of being there and learning from the Hall of Famers, but also seeing the TikTok generation come. And those are the ones that I think are taking advantage of the CEO mindset of, I am not just here, to do X's and O's. I'm here to turn, young men and young women into better humans. And at the same time, while I'm doing that, hopefully by educating them and surrounding them with the right things, that will lead to, wins them, hopefully national championships.
Really, really good stuff from Alex. Again, just a really sharp dude and continues to do great stuff in the space. So I highly recommend listening to that full interview. Again, we'll link it up in the show notes. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I hope you enjoyed taking a little trip down memory lane, or maybe being exposed to some great episodes that you hadn't heard before. Look at that backlog. Look at that archive. I have been so lucky to be able to have some great folks on the podcast to be able to share their knowledge and insight with you, the listeners or viewers, however you're consuming this podcast. And thanks again for downloading and listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. Find me on Twitter at NJH287, also on LinkedIn. Connect with me there. The website, you can find everything, including the full archive, as well as more content, dsmsports.net. And the podcast, you can subscribe, find every episode on your preferred podcast platform. We'll be back soon with a new episode. Until next time, this is Neil Horwitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.